February 28th, 2024. Well, we'll get into the subject here. We're back to the old subject, in fact, of the big the big military aid package to Ukraine and other issues associated with that. I guess to start off, I guess we can review the latest developments. Ukraine, I guess the Russians got another sucker punch. Ukrainians managed to shoot down one of their AWACS type planes, the A-50. It's still a little unclear exactly how they were able to pull that off. One claim is they used an old S-200 surface-to-air missile, which NATO code name was SA-5, which was a weapon that was a big mainstay of the continental Russian air defense from the mid-60s all the way to, I guess, the 80s. I guess it was originally designed to be able to intercept the B-70 bomber, which was never put into production, of course, but they had a defense against it just in case it did show up. And of course, the main target was, of course, the B-52s, which we did have a lot of. But so at any rate, that's an interesting development. I'm sure very frustrating to the Russians. I still think that it's amazing that they don't know these capabilities, and sometimes they surprise me how they always let themselves get sucker punched by not thinking a few steps ahead. But anyhow, that happened, and of course the other issue, apparently the Russians hunted down a couple of the mobile Patriot systems and knocked them out. So I guess they did do something, and I don't know but I don't think it was a Patriot that got the A-50. But the other issue is pending here is this big aid package, and I guess this is essentially where it stands at the moment. It's the normal group of Republicans that kind of let the guard down, passed this clean package that Schumer wanted, and it's in the hands of the House. And of course, Trump is opposing it as such, and I think there's a general consensus among the Republicans, at least the real conservative Republicans, that they shouldn't pass this, just like I've been advocating, without some serious border security measures. And of course, the so-called compromise bill was pretty flawed, and if nothing else, what killed it was this 5,000 illegal immigrants per day being allowed in on average over a week, or 8,500 before you really took really strong measures. Now, whether the overall bill was as bad as we think it is or not, I don't know, but that itself, I think, kind of is a showstopper. To even legitimize that was just the wrong signal to send. And so here we are. On the other hand, apparently the other idea I've raised, which I don't know, I'm still not sure how serious a risk this is, but the idea of a discharge petition could be raised, and it would require, I think, something like a majority of the members of Congress, which normally is 218, although it might be more like 217. Now, I don't know if 218 is a hard number, like written into the rule, or whether it's just a majority, which would be whatever it happens to be. And of course, the Democrats I think they're still down one seat and we're down two. So really, we've got, I guess, 3 seats. We got 432, I think, right now. So I guess a majority would be 218, I guess. But because the parity would be 217, I guess, something like that. At any rate, something in that range. And of course, that means there'd have to be some Republicans going along with it. However, many Democrats probably won't go along with it too, because they're part of the Squad and the other, pro-Arab factions, that are mad at about what's going on in Gaza. And so they're going to have to recruit more Republicans than that to get to the number to get their petition. There's also some complicated rules about the petition and time lags and what days of the week it can be brought up on and all that stuff, which gives the leadership of the Congress a chance to find a way to block it by proposing an alternative. And of course, I think I've been advocating all along, the most important thing to do really here isn't so much the actual numbers you change, although I think what I propose will change the numbers. But the biggest thing is to get items of immigration reform into law that can get past the filibuster. Because even if you have a fantasy that Trump wins the election and that we win both the House and the Senate with effective majorities, we still won't be able to get it passed through because of the filibuster. And we can't afford to get rid of the filibuster because if we do, the Democrats get in and totally change everything. We don't want to be responsible for that. So my thinking is that what we need to do is I think two things would be to reform what qualifies for amnesty. And the other thing is to put a quantitative limit on the number of paroles a president can give in a given year, say. And the idea here is that there are reasons for paroles that aren't basically people just walking across the border illegally. Maybe it's some kind of a crisis or something. There are other reasons you might have it, but to put a hard and fast rule on the number of paroles you can have, and that you need to have something a lot more serious than simply saying I feel threatened in my country and then walk across the border saying that. That we need to have tough rules on that redefine what qualifies for amnesty and what you have to be in order to get it. And if we can get that attached to the bill, then I think that'd be a big step ahead, and then kick it back to the Senate and see what they do with it. If they kill the whole thing, well, I guess that's good. Then you could get into separate bills, I guess, like one for Israel and one for Taiwan and one for Ukraine, or whatever they do. But anyway, that's what I kind of think about that. And of course, the reason to go with a compromise of some sort in terms of putting immigration in there, reform in there, is that if you don't do that, then the risk that they'll get exactly what they want, the clean bill without any immigration protections, with the discharge petition. In other words, the discharge petition puts stress on us that we have to do something as an alternative, or else we're going to probably end up getting that, essentially. Okay, if you like these videos, please give me a like. I'm still looking for more subscriptions, of course, and you can click the bell for notifications. Yeah, so that's kind of the way I see this situation here. As far as the Ukraine aid, and I know it's kind of interesting that Zelensky the other day said that there's been 31,000 Ukrainian troops lost in the war. I mean, what a joke. I mean, well, the idea, it's a lot more than that. Probably, do you want to say 310,000 to get off by a factor of 10 or more? Some people think it's even higher than that. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's a lot higher, obviously. And you can't have throwing really poorly trained troops into the front line in a war like this and not having very high casualties. So that's just the way it is. In fact, one of the problems that's there at this point is that so many of the people on the front line are basically just people that have been pressed into service with very little training. There are other units of the Ukrainian army that are better trained, and essentially the strategy seems to be to put these untrained people on the front line in trenches, and then when the Russians attack and take the trenches, then these more elite units will then counterattack and drive the Russians back. And so that's been the approach they've been using for several months. But the result is those untrained victims in the trenches get killed in the process. Not very nice for them. But in general, I don't think that we need to worry about the, as I mentioned previously, these bogus issues being raised, that if we don't send all this money right now and all this, that somehow the Russians are going to go all the way and attack NATO countries and all that. That is really just fear-mongering. In fact, I think the Russians will be hard-pressed to actually conquer Ukraine at the rate things are going. I mean, yes, they're making advances now. They're on the offensive. They're taking things sort of analogous in some ways the way Ukraine was taking things last summer. But the actual distances involved and the battles that will have to be waged all across Ukraine is pretty large. I mean, the first-person point-of-view drone, as it's called, has become the new ultimate weapon of the battlefield. I mean, one of them just took out an Abrams tank the other day on one of the Russian drones. I mean, and of course, a lot of Russian tanks we've seen in videos, anybody that watches this thing, have been destroyed that way by the Ukrainians. I mean, if this was key to the failure that Israel had on October the 7th, and their automated machine gun positions were all knocked out with these drones and allowing the attack to happen. This is a true game changer in the battlefield, coupled with the ability that's GPS locations and artillery have just transformed everything from mobile warfare back to a really nastier version of World War I trench warfare. And so the time it will take this conquest to occur, I think, is such that, at least for the moment, it isn't turning into a blitzkrieg. I don't know. Maybe, and right now we're about ready to go into the muddy season over there as we get into the spring. So that should slow things down quite a bit. By the summer, which is why the Ukrainians kind of waited to June to launch their 2003 counteroffensive, was because they had to wait for the ground to get good and solid, so that they could operate off road and have a little bit of safety, or not be coming down 100% predictable paths, and so this is kind of the situation. I think that there's time to do something. I mean, the other thing about this $60 billion aid package, a full third of it is simply to buy replacements for the weapons we've already given them out of our inventory. So those presumably won't go to Ukraine. They'll just go into our own inventory. The other 2/3, I guess, do go to Ukraine, but a lot of it has to still be built. And so it'll trickle in to some degree. Initially, there'll be a wave of things because, of course, we've been building things in the past few months. And, of course, so there'll be a bit of an uptick. And that may stall out the Russian operations. But and then, of course, we will have the introduction of the F-16, which we'll see how that goes. But these still are vintage F-16s. These are not your state-of-the-art ones that would be, produced like the ones that Turkey wants to buy, in return for letting Sweden into NATO. That's something like the new Block 72, latest version with all the advanced radars and stuff. These are things from the 1980s. And probably the most advanced 4th Gen plus Russian planes are probably pretty much equivalent to it. It will give them the AMRAAM missile, again, probably some of the earlier variants, but that's a potent weapon. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. On the other hand, if they want to do something like fly in and attack targets inside of Russia, they got to fly quite a distance because they need to keep their bases back so that they don't get hit with Russian missiles on the ground. And I think Russian air defenses may be pretty prohibitive. We'll see on that. I mean, we've been seeing these drones that fly in and they, get an oil refinery or some factory or something. But you have to remember, these are made out of materials that are not very radar reflective. I mean, maybe wood or plastic and stuff like that. And so they're not really metal planes like a F-16. The other problem is the F-16 kind of requires a nice runway, looking at its air intakes, and I would think certain kinds of attacks just designed to fog the runways might be interesting themselves. We'll see how that goes. Again, it'll definitely escalate things, and there are probably other weapons that will come in too. It just increases the casualties on both sides, but it probably doesn't really be prohibitive. I mean, so far none of them have. We are going to have the rocket-launched small diameter bomb weapons will be coming in, I guess, and those are GPS guided. And although Russia's had some luck jamming the JDAM bombs that they'd fed to the existing Soviet era planes that the Ukrainians still possessed. So anyway, that kind of gives you a rundown on what we think about upcoming conflicts. But to me, what I think would be best, but of course this isn't going to happen, would be to tie any additional military aid to an agreement that they drop their demands and simply agree to unconditional negotiations with the Russians, maybe at a neutral place like Turkey, and go back to where they were before Boris Johnson stuck his nose into it, and see if they can work out some kind of a deal. It looks like there's a lot of, sanctions and economic measures been taken against Russia, and some of the relief of some of those could be used in trade, I would think, for some things that the Ukrainians would want. Obviously, Russia's probably not going to give up totally because they've managed to weather most of these sanctions so far, and we'll see how that's how it all goes. It's just, but to me, entering into peace negotiations and trying to save the lives of the remaining Ukrainians would be probably a good idea, rather than encouraging them to continue this thing. Anyway, that's kind of what I think about it. But the big battle is coming up, I think, in Congress next week, is to see how that plays out. I really like the idea of still continuing to insist on some real border security measures in order to get this stuff through. Noting also that we've already passed last season a package for Israel has already been passed by the House. Yes, it would take away a little money from the IRS, but it's available to pass in the Senate if they want to. So, all right, this will be it for all. As always, I'll be posting this on Rumble and YouTube both, and they will be the address of my social media accounts are in the description below. So until next time.